Okay, so this was at the beginning, finally, the beginning of the demo. It took a while for people to gather because the King's Cross, original starting point at King's Cross, was taken over by the police, who obviously turned up right on time to Speaker's Corner, Hyde Park, in Hyde Park, where eventually people kicked off from. At about 12:30, police were already on the ball, trying to stop people from leaving the park, I think was the sort of plan. Didn't quite have the numbers maybe or the strategy to do that, but they certainly stopped a few people and asked a few questions on the way, and then before you knew it, someone had been arrested. Now it's sort of difficult to see exactly, but as far as I can tell, that was a gentleman of a certain age. He was, I think, probably late 50s, early 60s. You can briefly see his head, and the arrest was obviously pretty vigorous because his shoes come off. No police officer seems to be care about that or about the guy's welfare, but just look at how many. There's Father Christmas, of course, trying to convince the police. Look how many officers there are around that one person. It's like 20 odd officers arresting one guy. Anyway, territorial support group tearing around, getting themselves ready to deal with the demonstrators, who were quite clearly a huge menace. They're all getting their helmets ready, and here is that demo being pursued by the police. Very good natured, as you can probably tell. Fellow with a sound system and playing some kind of Irish music, I think. There, good natured, wide variety of people from all walks, all backgrounds and walks of life, and very good natured. Obviously the demo was unofficial to some extent, but every good demo has its qualities like that, and this is them going down towards. This is going down from Grosvenor Square, which of course was the famously where the US. The protest against Vietnam happened in the late 60s. Here's someone being arrested. The guy on the right there with the parka, I can't quite tell if he's something to do with the demo or if he's advising the police who to arrest. Quite strange that. Maybe he's got something to do with the demo. And this is where, of course, the demo was stopped by police, and they couldn't go any further, so they doubled back. Fortunately, because the road had been blocked off at the other end as well by the police, there happened to be a street off, but it was a one-way street. But again, fortunately, there was a little alleyway that people could squeeze through. And then there was a confluence of demos. I think another demo joined this one at this point. Another arrest. Plenty of people trying to arrest somebody there. Again, 10 or so officers for one person who obviously has since been arrested from that shot. And then the demo headed down Regent Street. Good acoustics on Regent Street. Those old buildings and tall buildings create a nice acoustic. And this was a very effective part of the demonstration, I thought. Again, it's hard to estimate because there were so many stragglers. It's one of those demos, of course, where people were a bit nervous about getting involved and being arrested. But I would say 3,000 people overall. Possibly a few more. Maybe that's a slightly conservative estimate. By this point, people saw the police arrive. The territorial support group arrive, so they sort of split off, thinking, they're going to try and stop the demo, but then someone sensibly thought, no, let's keep the demo together, strength in numbers and all that sort of thing. So rejoined the main demo after a bit of a split, but it was short-lived, to be honest, because or at least this part of it was because. Demonstrators would not have realised at this point, but they read the end of Regent Street where it meets Piccadilly Circus. There was already a substantial police presence there. Now what happens here is that you've got a charge of police, and they're clearly going for someone. They clearly have got someone that they want to get to, who they grab, and of course that person tries to get away, and of course it brings all the barriers down. It's very dramatic, but again, so many officers to arrest this one guy who, again, 50, 60 something maybe, grey-haired fella. Pretty heavy arrest, this one, and in numbers. There's a woman who tries to help. I think gets nicely politely shoved away by one of the frenzied territorial support group officers. Another lot pile in. Clearly, now what's quite interesting is, what's surprising, I suppose, is that the officers must obviously realise they're surrounded. Fortunately, the protesters are very peaceful, because you can imagine in other countries where there weren't such peaceful protests, that the police would be at risk there, because the protesters, much as the police might be bigger and stronger, did far outnumber them there, and they were surrounded in effect. As you can see, they're effectively, that they've created a circle around one guy. So that's 30 odd officers around one guy that they're trying to arrest, obviously to protect him from being saved by the crowd, I guess. But the crowd obviously could, in theory, have perhaps freed that guy. But of course, it's a peaceful protest. That's not going to happen, and that's probably a good thing on the whole. Now, having looked at this incredibly big arrest, I assume the guy was on the most wanted list. We'll go down to the end of Regent Street, where they had a few more officers, since they're probably a little bit short-handed if they're going to arrest 50-year-olds, and of course, yes, this is the reason why the march really couldn't continue down towards where you would expect it was probably trying to go, Trafalgar Square, since they were adding more officers, more territorial support group, and they were there. The vans were out in numbers to try and prevent the demonstration from going any further. So people rallied, found another place to go, and what you'll notice here is there's actually a photographer coming into shot here, who's being escorted by two police officers who I think are threatening him with arrest. And I don't know if he's a journalist, but he's a photographer, so he's there to document the protest. Not quite sure why the police think he should be arrested there. Anyway, so people went down Great Marlborough Street, but they were blocked. The police were down the other end, out of shot there, but there's a whole bunch of police officers down the end there. So a little bit chaotic. A few people went down Carnaby Street, and it sort of got a little bit broken up here. The police clearly hoping they could kettle the crowd, because of course they brought their helmeted territorial support group officers in to achieve that. And I think in effect they did close the road, but I didn't notice that there were too many people within their kettling area. They may have been able to, I guess, if they've got 60 odd officers there, they must mean they've arrested 2 people. I guess that's kind of roughly the ratio they seem to be working on as far as police to arrest ratios are concerned. And this finally is when the crowd managed to gather again through social media and so on and so forth. People were able to recongregate at Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park, and surprisingly still managed to keep quite a few people together. Again, people straggling all over the place, nervous about being seen as perhaps being part of the main protest. So, but I would say 1,500 people, maybe more, 2,000 perhaps. Police officers certainly got wind of this fairly quickly. It's very difficult, of course, when it's on social media for them not to find out, and took appropriate action, i.e. they turned up and they tried to close one of the gates. I'm not entirely sure what the instructions would have been there, but they made their way to the to one of the exits, the same exit that we saw at the beginning of the video. In effect, perhaps they thought that people were going to have another go at marching down to Trafalgar Square, perhaps, or they'd found one more person they wanted to arrest, so they needed 60 officers to do that. But they closed one gate, and so you could only leave by the other 36 gates or exits to Hyde Park if you wanted to. So yeah, plenty of police being used to marshal the few hundred peaceful protesters, and of course all this happening at the heart of London's free speech, famous tourist area for free speech, Speaker's Corner, where free speech isn't quite so free anymore, I guess you could say.